This episode of New Politics was released on the 7th of February, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
What sort of system have we got when criticising a government becomes a crime? Who decides when political speech is psychological harm? We've got these new laws that won't strengthen democracy, they'll actually make it weaker through fear, silence and political convenience. I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
And just a reminder that New Politics is produced by independent media. You can listen in, share, subscribe and support New Politics at Patreon and Substack. It's just $5 per month. Or you can donate directly at our website at newpolitics.com.au. And of course, all of this is a good way to support independent journalism. There's been a new batch of anti-hate speech legislation that was passed in Parliament recently, and there's a lot of issues that have come out of this, including the right to criticise the actions of a foreign government and calling out the actions of a foreign government that might be involved in war crimes. And we're still not sure if criticising the Israel government over genocide or war crimes is a breach of these new laws, and this is all tied in with what's described as psychological harm within the legislation. So that means if we accuse Israel of genocide and war crimes, apartheid against Palestinians, and someone listens in, and I assume that if they're a Zionist or someone that's pro-Israel, and alleges that what we've said is causing psychological harm to them, well, that represents a breach of the laws, and who knows what's going to happen after that. And before people start saying, oh, come on, Eddie and David, that's ridiculous, no one's going to make that sort of allegation. But here's an issue that was taken to court recently in Sydney.
What police allege was an anti-Semitic threat, the defence says was anything but.
This seems to be a case of charge burst and answer questions later.
Serena Tanuri charged with harassing Mandy Sacker, a nutritionist of Jewish faith she'd never met but seen on TV and social media. The alleged offending contained in a voicemail 1 week after the Bondi massacre. It's alleged Serena sent a text to Mandy, writing, "Hey, how are you? Is this Mandy? I saw somewhere that you helped Katie from Married at First Sight with her nutrition. I was wondering if you could help me as well, Serena." Around 5 hours later, a call from Serena's number went to Mandy's voicemail. No voices were heard on the recording, but Mandy claims she heard sounds she believed were gunshots, causing her immediate fear and nervousness.
It could be a bed creaking, it could be someone snoring.
The 26-year-old, who has also been hit with an AVO, pleaded not guilty today. The case is listed for next month when a decision will be made on whether the charge is dropped or if the matter goes to a hearing.
And you were very shocked to hear you being charged from police?
Especially with my mental health. Just wish people could understand.
And this particular incident occurred before this new legislation came into place. It happened recently, so who knows what will happen with these far stronger laws. But these new laws are in response to the Bondi terror attack in December last year, and they will not do anything at all to stop these kinds of attacks in the future. But what these laws actually have done is that they've set up a two-tier system that are specifically for the benefit of one section of the community, and that's pretty much the Zionists and pro-Israel groups, and then they target another group. And it's like a de facto system of stopping protest and dissent of a particular kind, and that's anything to do with pro-Palestine action. And these new laws are yet to be tested, David, but pro-Palestine action is currently on a rolling 21-day ban, and I think it can go on for 3 months. And during the week, there have been those Invasion Day rallies, and there's also been March for Australia rallies. And March for Australia rallies, well, they're not my cup of tea, but they've got a right to protest. But the point is that those rallies have gone ahead. But we've got these new selective laws where the government is now deciding what is acceptable or what is not acceptable. And we've also got one part of the community being able to selectively apply law based on psychological harm. And I just don't think this is acceptable in a democratic country.
The challenge with any law is to make sure that it's fairly applied across. Now, I know that there are those who didn't like the Andrew Bolt 18C laws, saying that it was unfair to white people. Except, white people have had it so bad for the last few hundred years. It's just another cross for us to bear, really. But in all seriousness, it was the same weight if you were in a minority and a vulnerable group. So if you were Muslim, or if you were Indigenous, if you were Asian, if you were LGBTQI, if you were South American,
I guess that's the point, David, that 18C is applicable to everyone. It applies to everyone.
And I think, too, you could probably argue that if somebody came in and called me names, I could possibly take them to court if I could show true damage, which I doubt I'd be able to.
Well, I'd stick up for you, David.
Thank you.
That's okay, no problem.
These new laws favour one minority group over the other, it seems. Now, I suspect when they get challenged in court, which they inevitably will, the interpretation will either be, no, if you can't say this about one group of people, you can't say it about anyone, which they don't want, of course. They want the Zionist groups want exception from every other group. They want an extra layer of protection. Now, the other thing I'll say is that Zionism isn't a religion and it's not a culture. It's a political movement. Not all Jews are Zionists. Not all Zionists are Jews. And I think we've got to remember that. It's an uneasy marriage between harsh atheist geopoliticals, evangelical Christians who believe that Jesus is coming any day now. And if he is, I wish he'd hurry up because we need the change.
I'm sick and tired of waiting, David.
Yeah. And Messianic Jews and a certain group. There's plenty of hardline Jewish people who believe Israel is an idol and shouldn't have never happened. There's plenty of Jewish people who absolutely are opposed to what's happening in Gaza. So really what they're saying is that they don't want this idea of Zionism criticised. As a political scientist, as a historian, as a philosopher, and you can laugh each time I throw out a title, you can laugh harder, that's okay. This is not right. I can argue the notion of Christianity with a Christian without ever once thinking that they are wrong to have their beliefs, or even thinking that they shouldn't have those beliefs. I know a lot of the more radical atheists struggle with that, but the difference is Christianity as a belief, Christianity as a philosophy, and Christianity as an idea can be separated, and in terms of argument, at least. I think it was Caitlin Johnson, but she said, you don't have Zionist traditional clothing. You don't have Zionist traditional music. There's no Zionist literature of any worth in terms of poetry or novels or epic poems or legends. It's just an ugly political idea. And she's right.
I guess the upshot of all of this is that these are essentially political laws, and there just hasn't been enough scrutiny over these laws passed by Parliament. They were introduced in a mad rush. I think they had 3 days to scrutinise this legislation, and this is primarily a political response to all the pressure that's been heaped upon the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, personally, and also all the pressure that's been heaped upon the federal government. And politically, no government is going to put up with this sort of pressure for forever, and the political response is these laws, which were pretty much requested by the pro-Israel lobby groups, and the results of these laws that will criminalise a lot of innocent people, well, including us possibly. And this is how you end up getting bad laws. And I guess the other point is, well, how do you balance all of these issues within a society where there is one group that is, well, every group needs to be protected within society? And I would have thought that there's already so many laws that criminalise genuine hate speech and genuine vilification, but this idea of psychological harm, well, how do you actually test this? Is there a local copper at the police station who's going to do some psychological testing, or those psychometric tests to test these spurious claims and then arrest people based on these psychometric testings? And we don't know the full details of that butt call case, but it's actually a case it actually has gone to a court of law, and it's one of the most ridiculous cases that I've ever heard about. And I suspect, and we can never be too sure these days, but I suspect that it will not proceed any further. But if that ends up being the case, it was just a complete waste of court time and of police resources. But then the other question is, where does it actually end? Because I feel psychological harm whenever there's a neo-Nazi protest for different family reasons. If there's a neo-Nazi protest in Sydney or a March for Australia, I feel psychological harm whenever I come across a March for Australia rally or hear about it. Whenever I hear Gillian Segal speak, I feel psychological harm, or Zionist action and all that sort of stuff. So the question is, well, if we feel psychological harm, should we be lodging a few complaints at the local police station? So, the question is, well, where does it actually end and where will all of this take us?
To reframe it a little bit, as a white Australian of British descent, I do not feel this. This is pure example. But if I saw a always was, always will be t-shirt and I felt offended by that, everyone listening here would rightly think me to be a racist wanker. Does that cause me psychological harm, or does it mean that I have to And I absolutely support Indigenous causes. I absolutely think that we have treated the Indigenous population badly, and I do agree, always was, always will be Indigenous land, and that we walk in that shadow. And that's all of that. I'm just using myself as an example because I don't want to assume, even though I'm pretty sure, other people's opinions. But would a right-wing white nationalist test these laws and say, yes, they were wearing a black BLAK, Black Power T-shirt, and I felt really uncomfortable and I felt psychologically harmed from that? Would the courts accept that? And I have seen the theory. It was some guy on local radio on the Northern Beaches who thinks that Anthony Albanese is a lot smarter than we're giving him credit for, that he's letting these things go to their logical conclusion so that they collapse. I'm not sure that he's right. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of chaos potentially come from these laws, and it might be that they get quietly shelved, that they're on the books, and unless you can absolutely prove psychological harm, which, given how many people get off murder through insanity clauses, which is next to none, and those that do end up spending the rest of their lives in hospital, essentially, still in jail, just a different type of jail. I am surprised that an Attorney General would let this type of stuff through, which does make me wonder, is there a long game? Without trying to defend the government more than it needs defence, and always willing to criticise the government where it needs criticising. But I do wonder, is they're running a game of, let's give them what they want and let them hang themselves with the rope we give them.
Oh, sure. Well, these laws haven't been tested in court yet. They've only been around for a couple of weeks. I suspect that they'll be tested in the court of law pretty soon. But the Bondi terror attack, well, essentially that's a catalyst for all of these new laws. And these new laws, they don't actually feed directly into stopping these sorts of attacks, but it's mainly about the suppression of dissent against the State of Israel. That's what all of this is about. And that grand goal of Gillian Segal, the special envoy, to adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism into law. And if you think that clamping down on anti-Semitism at universities when it doesn't really exist, or removing gun ownership from 6 down to 4, if you think that's going to stop the next terror attack like the one in Bondi, well, I've got some news for you. It probably more than likely won't, or definitely won't. And we also had a National Day of Mourning recently, and we've only had 2 others since Federation. In 2010 over the bushfires in Victoria, where 173 people died, and also one in 2022 when the Queen died. And there was also an unofficial day of mourning organised by the Indigenous community in 1938 as well. And David, personally, I don't care if there's a National Day of Mourning or not, but I'd just like to know why there is one on, or why there was one on this occasion, when there have been so many other tragedies that could have been commemorated in this way. The Port Arthur massacre in 1996, or the Bali bombing in 2002, when 88 Australians lost their lives. And it seems to me, based on what I saw, that the National Day of Mourning was turned into a political event. And the Premier of New South Wales, Chris Minns, said this.
Finally, just as you reclaim Bondi Beach, tonight you've taken back the Opera House as well.
And David, I thought that Bondi Beach and the Sydney Opera House actually belong to all of us. And if it has been reclaimed, well, who actually took it away? And this event was also asking for donations to the Chabad organisation, which does support the State of Israel and opposes the creation of the State of Palestine. But to me, it seemed like a highly politicised event. The Prime Minister and the government were attacked again for not doing enough, when it should have been, for me, it should have been a solemn day of reflection and respecting 15 people who were killed in the Bondi terror attack, and also recognising that 3 of those people were not Jewish either. So even, I don't think I've said anything controversial there, David, but offering this sort of commentary, it might be deemed to be anti-Semitic. And well, if someone listens into this, will they go and report it and off to court we go? We can get pro bono support for all of that. That's not the issue. And like I said, I don't think that I've said anything unreal there, but that seems to be the path that we're following now. There's these loose laws that criminalise what someone feels rather than what someone has done. And I just think we're going to get a lot of problems from these laws.
We still don't know the motivations of the shooters too. Clearly, they were bad people who approached the problem in a way that nobody should. I have no problem with that type of framing in this case. They weren't from the Middle East.
Well, there was also speculation that their actions were based on Israel's support of India and India's actions in the Indian part of Kashmir. So not Azad Kashmir, but Kashmir within India.
That starts to make a bit of sense, given I can't see them really being pro or anti-Palestine as the core of their philosophy. As far as I know, and I might have missed it because we've been on holidays and...
well, also a lot of this is based around speculation. Like nothing has come from...
Nothing has come from
Naveed Akram.
Yeah. And the police may or may not release it. That will depend on the sensitivity of the information they get and the appropriateness of it to be spread publicly, etc. And while in this case, I'm trusting the police to do the right thing. They may not, and if they don't, we will talk about it. But there's no point in making assumptions in the middle of an investigation. It's not till we know what we know that we can really talk about. But yes, it wasn't only Jewish people who were killed. Chabad is a very dodgy, or Chabad is a very dodgy organisation. They were raising money for the Israeli Defence Force. Now, the Israeli Defence Force is one of the best funded in the world. And we can argue as to why it would need money from Australia, America, places that aren't the Israeli government is odd. They had the guy who was killed, and it was tragic that he was killed. He shouldn't have been killed. But he was a very pro-Zionist rabbi. And he had some quite disturbing views on how to treat Palestinians. Again, that's not to say he should have been shot or he deserved it or anything like that. The 15 people who lost their lives is a terrible tragedy that should never have happened. And I think we've got to remember this, that we vehemently disagreed with them while they were alive does not diminish the value of their worth as lives as human beings. But to just jump to the Royal Commission for a second, I know of at least 3 Royal Commissions which went in to find something and found completely the opposite. A couple into corruption in the building trade, which found that the unions weren't the corrupt operators in dodgy building deals, etc. And the Pink Bat ones, which was meant to crucify Peter Garrett, and found that in fact that he was actually a very good minister, one of the best ministers in the government and one of the best of the century, who ran into some bad luck that no one could have dealt with any better. Which is then you start getting the attitude from the we're sick of Royal Commissions. So I suspect this Royal Commission may not go the way that its promoters want it to go. Once we find out why we're running a public Hanukkah service, very rare, why Shabbat was involved and what Shabbat does, that'll all come out. And to take us back to the day of mourning, should we mourn them? Yes, of course we should. Was it a terrible thing? Yes, it was. It was not only an attack on Australian Jewish people, but it was an attack on all Australians. Bondi Beach belongs to everybody. despite the claim of Zionists and despite the claim of white supremacists, Bondi Beach belongs to everybody. It's an internationally renowned location. The three things that people come to see when they come to Sydney is the Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, and you do that in one go because get off at Circular Quay and there they are. And then you get back on the train, change at museum or change at Town Hall and go to Bondi. And that's your Sydney tick-tick, and then you can go on to Taronga Zoo and the wonderful restaurants and the rest of the stuff that Sydney offers. So Bondi belongs.
Have you been sponsored by Tourism Australia to say these things?
I got the motorbike from Scott Morrison. I thought I better. But my point is that Bondi is not just for one group in the community. It's for every group in the community, and it's for everybody. And was it a terrible thing? Yes, it was a horrible thing. It was awful. I was with a couple of friends of mine who were nurses, and they were called into the hospital. They were on a day off, and they were called into the hospital to prepare. And when they were called in, they said, there's been some kind of shooting somewhere. But they knew nothing more, and then the news reports came out. It shook everybody, rightly too. But to try and enclose it so one group of people gets inordinately privileged, I think misses the point.
I think there's also that question about how all of these pieces of legislation feed into the recent spate of cancellations of cultural events. And last month we had the cancellation of the Adelaide Writers Festival, and that was based on the invitation to Randa Abdel Fattah being rescinded, and she's a Australian Palestinian writer and academic, and a lot of other writers decided to withdraw in
120, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So they all withdrew from in protest, so there was not much of a writers' festival to be had then, and that was all based on the feelings from the Jewish Community Council of South Australia. Now, I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't have feelings about this. That's right and proper. If you want it, you can feel whatever you want about any particular issue, but it's just that the feelings of certain people seem to have a lot more clout than other people within the community, and I think this is where the problem is. And the end result of that situation was that the entire Writers' Festival was destroyed. So the rights of the Jewish community were fully respected, but the rights of the people who were going to attend this festival had their rights completely trashed. And needless to say, so did Randa Abdel Fattah. So that's related to about the right to comment or the right to speak. And that's what we've been doing for most of today, David. But then we have the right to protest. So that's almost being trashed as well, or it is being trashed. But in a few weeks' time, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, been invited to Australia, will be visiting. And I don't want this guy to come to Australia at all. Not at all. There's credible evidence to suggest that he's incited a genocide and and advocated for a genocide in Gaza. So, and people might not know who he is, but he's the guy that's also signed bombs just before they were dropped over Gaza, and he's also the head of a state that's killed over 70,000 Palestinian people. So there is going to be a lot of people protesting against the visit of Isaac Herzog in Sydney and in Melbourne, and there's a lot of preparations on the way at the moment. Here's Nasser Mashni from the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network.
It's official. The president of apartheid Israel will be here from the 8th to the 12th of February. This disgusting human is the head of state of a country guilty of genocide. Herzog stands accused of inciting genocide, and our government is rolling out the red carpet. The same bloke who signs bombs that kill innocent children, the same bloke that thinks no one is innocent in Gaza. Multiple Australian and international legal organisations have formally called on the AFP to investigate Herzog for incitement to genocide, a crime under Australian law. This isn't a fringe opinion. This is grounded in the Genocide Convention and our own criminal code. Herzog has publicly framed the entire civilian population in Gaza as legitimate targets. Words from presidents matter. Under international law, incitement is not protected speech. It's a prosecutable offence. Australia must arrest this criminal, not welcome him. Sadly, we know we can't count on our authorities to throw this evil man into jail, and when Herzog gets here, we must be there too. On the streets in numbers demanding accountability and justice. We need to let this bloke know genocidal criminals are not welcome. And when Herzog gets here, we need everyone everywhere to get out loud and proud and make sure this war criminal knows that he's not welcome. And remember, my friends, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
So David, are people going to feel psychologically harmed about this protest action? Are there going to be mass arrests of people at these protests? And I feel psychologically harmed about Isaac Herzog coming to Australia while he's got these allegations of genocide floating about him. So I feel harmed, but I'm the one that's likely to get arrested or punished if I do go and protest against the arrival of Isaac Herzog to Australia. And I think this gets us back to what we were talking about before. Acquiescing to a noisy and powerful group of Zionists has resulted in all of these potential legal issues, and it's not going to silence dissent at all. It's not going to shut me up. It's not going to shut you up. How on earth can you have a situation where calling out a genocide gets you arrested? And I guess it is happening in Britain and in Germany, but we just cannot allow this to happen in Australia. And if it does end up being the case that we all get arrested or shut down for commentary, well, it's not really going to shut us up completely. I think the level of dissent will just start to appear in different ways.
Yeah, it rarely works, stopping dissent. And we can look at the communist system in Eastern Europe, and you get the rise of solidarity helped by the Catholic Church. You get the rise of dissidents like Václav Havel, the Romanian who depose Ceausescu. You get
Lech Walesa as well in Poland.
Lech Walesa in Poland, and Adam Michnik and all of those guys. Eastern Germany had dissidents, and they repressed them brutally when they could find them. But an unjust system, this takes us back to a couple of weeks back when we were talking about the States, an unjust system cannot work. You need to have that freedom to protest, even if you're wrong. That's why, we don't like it when the National Front marches or whatever they're called. But provided it's non-violent, let them go and let their ideas be laughed out of existence. We don't like it. And again, when it comes to Zionism, you can have as many stupid ideas as you like, and provided they're not hurting other people. And I don't mean the nebulous idea of psychological harm, because until that is sorted out exactly what it is, it's like saying, I don't like the colour blue. So everything in public space that's blue has to be repainted. I believe that they're overplayed their hand, and I think that they're probably losing support that they might have had otherwise, because it's not trying to find a space where it's equitable, it's trying to find a space that's dominant, and we've never really been for that in Australia, and that's going to create problems down the track for everybody if these things continue like that.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you'd like to support our style of journalism and commentary, please make a donation at our website at newpolitics.com.au. We don't beg, plead, beseech or gaslight you about journalism coming to an end. We just keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.